Hello, everyone. Again, thank you very much for joining. It's a pleasure being here with you in this third Hamilton House webinar. It's a great pleasure and an honor. What we will do today, as Terry already mentioned, we're going to talk about developing critical thinking skills, online and offline. But first, allow me to introduce myself to those of you who I didn't have the chance to meet. My name is Akis Panayi. I'm a Hamilton House teacher trainer, a Cambridge Assessment English presenter, and an examiner for Cambridge qualifications A1 to B2. Those of you doing Cambridge exams, you already know that that's young learners, B1 preliminary, A2 key, B1 preliminary, and B2 first. I'm the assistant head of the languages department in the school I work for, but above all, I'm a classroom teacher. I've studied and worked in the UK and Cyprus as an English teacher, and I host teacher training workshops worldwide. I'm based in Cyprus. Okay, what we'll do today, the aims of this workshop, in the next half hour, we will look at these questions in as much detail as possible. What is critical thinking? How do I know if my students are critical thinkers? What is low and what is high level thinking? Can my course book help me teach critical thinking? What questions can I ask my students to really make them think? And how does critical thinking interrelate with academic success? Hello to those of you typing your message in the chat box. If you have any questions, you can type your question in the chat box. However, I might not be in a position to answer your question immediately because I might not see it, I might miss it, but we will definitely come back to it at the end of this webinar when we will have a section which will be dedicated to questions and answers. Right, the first thing we will do is this. Your participation is required, if you like, in this section. We will look at what critical thinking is, and there are 4 gaps over there, and I would like you to think of 2 adverbs and 2 adjectives that go in those gaps. Critical thinking is the ability to think gap and gap. I'm sorry, maybe the box, I should put the box right here with my face so you can all see the screen. So critical thinking is the ability to think gap and gap about what to do or what to believe. It includes the ability to engage in gap and gap thinking. Any ideas that you might have about what kind of words? Critically, right, freely, yeah, okay, good point. You're almost there. Critical thinking is the ability to think clearly and rationally, yeah, about what to do or what to believe. It includes the ability to engage in reflective and independent thinking. To be able to have your own unique voice. Moving on, let's have a look what some people have said about critical thinking, or famous quotes that relate to critical thinking. What people said, Richard Dawkins have said that teach children how to think for themselves, how to evaluate evidence, and how to disagree with you. Aristotle have said, it is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. And Desmond Tutu said, don't raise your voice, improve your argument. When you have a good argument and you believe in yourself, you know what you're talking about, you don't need to raise your voice. You know that you have a good sound argument, but to be able to do that, you must develop critical thinking skills. Now, let's move on and have a look at why we as teachers should teach critical thinking skills and should place emphasis and focus on developing critical thinking skills, or helping our students to develop critical thinking skills. Well, first of all, for some philosophical reasons, if you like, to produce language, students need something to talk or write about. Compelling ideas and thought-provoking topics. That's something that will help them when they move on and continue their studies in college or university. They will need to come up with thought-provoking topics. Using your critical thinking skills provides you with your own unique voice. What we've mentioned before about reflective and independent thinking. And a good teacher makes you think even when you don't want to. More reasons why we should teach critical thinking skills, this time psychological reasons, if you like, because critical thinking involves solving problems and puzzles. Students need to be able to approach texts critically. It's what we call critical reading, which will then help them in their research paper writing when they move on to college and university. And lastly, language learning, like any learning, is enhanced when we challenge the brain to think critically. Now, let's consider this question. How do I know as a teacher, how do I know if my students are critical thinkers and if they have achieved that level, that high level of thinking that I as a teacher would like them to reach? Well, I know they are critical thinkers because they have the ability to analyze and to evaluate. They have the ability to question. They can communicate logically, raising good and sound arguments, as we mentioned before. They also have the desire to be well informed. They want to know more. They ask questions. They are not satisfied with just one point of view. They want to find out what other people have said, what other people have written about a given topic. They are honest with themselves. They know what they can do. They know their strengths. They know the areas that they need to work on. Yeah. And they give themselves deliberate practice in those areas with of course, the teacher's guidance. They are open-minded and they're flexible. They can adapt easily. Okay. We can't really talk about critical thinking without mentioning Benjamin Bloom, the man that you see right there on your screen, who was an educational psychologist, and he developed the taxonomy of the different learning objectives. In 1956, Benjamin Bloom developed the taxonomy, the classification of the different learning objectives and skills that teachers set for their students. We will look at the taxonomy in a moment, but before that, we should say that in 2001, Anderson and Krathwohl have changed Bloom's taxonomy a little bit to make it more active, to make it reflect a more active form of thinking, which is what we want in today's teaching and learning, to make students active. Now, what Anderson and Krathwohl basically did is they made two major changes to Bloom's taxonomy of the learning objectives. On your left-hand side, you will see the 1956 taxonomy, the original, and in 2001, it's the revised taxonomy with two main changes. The first one is Anderson and Krathwohl. They took the noun from the pyramid and they turned it into a verb, which immediately makes the meaning of the word more active. So knowledge became to remember. Comprehension, which is the second stage of the learning objectives, became to understand. Application, apply, and so on and so forth. So the first thing that a student does, and the first thing that the teacher should encourage the student to do, is to remember the information and then understand it, and then be able to apply that information in a certain and in a given context. Then analyze, evaluate, and lastly to create. And that's the other major change that Anderson and Krathwohl have made to Bloom's taxonomy. They switched the order of the last two objectives. So Bloom in 1956, he classified synthesis, creation, before evaluation, but Anderson and Krathwohl decided that to create would be the last step of learning objectives. So now we have this pyramid and these 6 steps that students follow to reach the highest level of thinking. And these skills are categorized as low-level thinking skills and high-level thinking skills. Now, I will give you 15 seconds to think about which of these skills are categorized as low-level thinking skills and which are categorized as high-level thinking skills. Think about it for 15 seconds and then we'll come back. 3 of these skills are low level and the other 3 are high level. Okay. The first 3 are what we call the low-level thinking skills. To remember, to understand, and to apply. Basically, these are the skills where, thank you very much for your answer, Anastasia. These are the 3 skills where the students gather information. Yeah, and then in the next 3 steps are the high-level thinking skills where they analyze, evaluate, and create. They process the information. Now, here's another task. We ask questions in the classroom. We all do it, but we don't really realize that we're doing it when we raise those questions in the classroom for our students to answer. There are certain types of questions that apply to low-level thinking and high-level thinking accordingly. And here on your screen, you can see 10 questions. 5 of them go with low-level thinking, remember, understand, and apply. And the other 5 go with high-level thinking, analyze, evaluate, and create. And we have questions like who, why might, what, where, what would you recommend, how would you contrast, when, what could happen if, how many, and what alternative. The questions that help students with the development of low-level thinking skills first are basically the WH questions mostly, like who, what, where, when, how many, and so on and so forth, where we get to see as teachers and we get to check that the students have understood and they remember the information and they can apply this information to answer questions or any other kind of task that we give them. And with the high-level thinking skills, this is where we want to check and we want to challenge them a little bit more. So we ask questions like, why might this happen? Or what would you recommend in this situation? Or what alternative? And so on and so forth. What could happen if? How would you contrast this with that? Yeah. And that's where we challenge their brain a bit more. But first, we should start with questions, with the questions in the first column, who, what, where, and then move on to the high-level thinking questions. Moving on, I would like to show you an example. In the first slide we had in this presentation, in our aims, we talked about, there was a question, how a good course book can help you, can help the teacher promote critical thinking skills and help students develop those skills. I'll show you an example from Hamilton House new series Ultimate. This is targeted at B1 level. And in this lesson, in this page right there that you can see on your screen, students read and listen to information about haunted houses. I'll show you an example how this, the tasks help students develop their thinking. Now, in the first task, students listen to the podcast. If you can read the instructions in exercise 2, listen to the podcast and complete the notes. Now, this exercise applies to help students remember and understand the information. That applies to low-level thinking. Then we move on to the next question, to the next task, which where the instructions read, label the photos in exercise 1. Would you still like to visit one of the two? Why and why not? Now, what we ask students here to do is to take the information that they listened to and apply it and decide if they want to visit one of those places now that they have gathered that information. So that's low-level thinking again. Moving on, the next task they do, they read a text about haunted houses again, And look at what the instructions in exercise 4 say. Read the text and note down 5 things that interested you most. Now that's evaluation. Now we move on to higher level thinking, where they evaluate the information to decide the 5 things that interested them. And of course, as teachers, we can add more questions to that and ask students to reason about their choices. Yes, say why and why not. And lastly, in the final exercise of that page, the students prepare something of their own. Prepare the next episode of the World's Most Haunted Houses podcast. Go online, the instructions say, and find information about haunted houses in other countries. Then prepare a presentation. And there are bullet points to guide them regarding to what they should include in their presentation. That's creation. That's high-level thinking. Later on, I will have another example from a different page to show you how the course book can help you. Now, let's look at some questions that we can raise in the classroom to make students think. Some questions that we use to help students and to check if they remember the information, which is the first step of the learning objectives. Can you list 3 or 4? Can you select what is, when did, which one, where is? Mostly WH questions. Same with when checking understanding. Can you explain what is happening? How would you compare? What facts show? Which is the best answer? And how would you summarize? And so many more questions that I'm sure you already ask your students in the classroom. Then, to check application. How would you apply this to develop that? What other way would you plan to do this? And what elements would you use to change something? And then we move on to the higher level thinking, where the level of challenge increases in the questions, and to check if the students can analyze, we can raise questions like, how would you classify? Or why do you think this? What evidence can you find? How is this related to that? And what conclusions can you draw? In order to evaluate, we can raise questions such as, how would you justify your answer? Do you agree with the outcomes? What is your opinion of this? What choice would you have made? And lastly, the final step of learning objectives, of learning aims, to create. We can raise questions like, what changes would you make to do this? How would you test? Can you propose an alternative? And suppose you could do that, what would you do? Let me take you to another example from Ultimate English to see how the course book is set up to promote critical thinking. This is taken from Unit 4. And like every unit, it starts with reading. And what we can do here is look at the different questions. Now, the question 3 and question 4 in this page helps students with remembering and understanding information. In task 3, they have to read the text and write and choose between right, wrong, or doesn't say. And in question 4, they listen and they match the people on the left column to the information and the ideas on the right column. Now that's remembering and understanding information. And then in the next exercise, which says, you and your partner are going to give a class presentation on one aspect of life in the future. Talk together about the topics and so on and so forth. And decide which topic would be best for your presentation. Now, here is where they analyze and they evaluate. They have listened and have read and have received information about the topic, and now they should analyze and evaluate and decide which would be best for their presentation. And then we give them the guidelines in the green box that you can see behind where it says work it out. They give them guidelines to discuss alternatives. In the other box on your right-hand side where it says language checklist, we give them the language. You can't see that clearly because it's blocked, but it's where we give them the language they can use to discuss alternatives. And the final task for them would be to create something of their own. That says 1 minute talk. You have 1 minute to tell the class about recycling in the future. Use these questions to help you. 1, 2, 3, 4 questions that they can use. So you can trust the course book that will help you with critical thinking. And the software is an important factor when you teach online, and you have a good software like this one. It can help you a lot. It can take you a long way. Now, in the online classroom, the principles, more or less, of helping students to develop critical thinking, the main principles are more or less the same. The teacher will still demonstrate the skills that they wish to teach and provide opportunities for analysis, evaluation, and creation. Incorporate high-level thinking in their assessment. Test your students according to their high-level thinking skills, according to their ability to analyze, evaluate, and create, not just memorization. Evaluate work based on analysis rather than memorization, and encourage students to ask as many questions as possible. Furthermore, provide students with additional resources that are exemplars of critical thinking skills. And that is something that the internet and online teaching can help you with. You can guide students to websites of your choice, or send them links where they can read someone's opinion or an article about a given topic, about the main topic of your lesson, and provide them with extra resources for additional support. You can accept, and you should accept, assignments in various forms like PowerPoint, PDF, Word document, even video. Some students might not be very good with PowerPoint, but they can record themselves. That's also acceptable. And resubmissions. Give them chances for retakes and resubmissions. Right. Okay. Before we finish off and we move on to questions and answers, I will be more than happy to answer any of your questions. Let's do a quick overview of what we have said in the past half hour. Critical thinking, both low and high level thinking, can be taught at all language levels. You can teach high level thinking to low language levels and low level thinking to high language levels. Yeah. High level thinking requires students to do something with the facts, not to simply memorize them. And critical thinking skills are key for success in university and college, as we've already mentioned. And let's not forget that academic success depends on the student's ability to derive knowledge from collected data, be selective with their data, make educated judgments, synthesize information from various sources, and deliver insightful presentations. Therefore, we as teachers, our task is to teach students how to use new information to analyze, evaluate, and create. But we shouldn't forget that it's equally important to remember, understand, to be able to remember, understand, and apply the low-level thinking skills. Right. Thank you very much for your patience. I'll direct you to Terry, who will set up the questions and answers. Hi, Terry.
Hi, Akis. Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you very much, Akis. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. However, we're not finished just yet. This is a very, very insightful presentation. Again, thank you, Akis, for delivering this for us. And now is the time where we would like to accept any questions you might have about Akis's presentation, maybe about anything in general that you're facing as English teachers. And so if you just type your questions, I'd be happy to post them for Akis or myself to answer. So let's see what we have. I'm opening up the list. Opening up the list. Lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much. All the way from Argentina. Muchas gracias. Thank you, Maria. Any questions? I see some people are typing, so maybe it'll take a moment for these questions to come through. Okay. Very interesting. Thank you very much, Yodia. Thank you. So I just want to, while maybe some of you guys are coming up with your questions, I just wanted to, I guess, emphasize that the slides that you saw in Akis's presentation is from our latest course book called Ultimate English. Okay, so it's a course book from B1 level to C2 level. And one of the main emphasis of this course book is developing critical thinking skills in our students. So if you are interested in learning more about this specific course book or any other one of our course books that help develop critical thinking skills, both online and offline, you can send us your questions. We'll be happy to answer them. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure for us as well. All right. So again, if we have a few moments for question, otherwise, if there are no questions, we can end today's seminar. We have some more seminars coming up this week. So I want to remind all of you guys to keep your eyes open on our social media. We will be posting all of the registration links for upcoming webinars. Our next one being on Thursday. That's 2:30 p.m. Greek time, 12:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. And let's see, any questions? See, this is what happens when you have a presenter as good as Akis, is that you're so clear and you present it so well that there's really no questions. It's straightforward.
It might be a good sign that there aren't any questions.
Yes.
I think it's a good sign. Thank you very much, everyone. It was a great honor and a pleasure, and to be here with you. And I do hope we have the chance to meet again.
Yes.
Online or offline.
Absolutely, Akis. All right. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.
Thank you for attending. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.